Alright, time to talk about another 4 or 5 different bands. Weird mix of bands. And the only rules really are, do I actually like them and have a thing or two to say about them? And do I have at least 2 pieces of physical media from them? And that's the case with all these except for the first one, which I'm going to cheat a bit on. Right now I'm listening to Genghis Tron, Board Up the House. This came out in 2008. It was their first on Relapse, their 3rd overall, and the last before they either broke up or went on a 12-year hiatus. But I really like this album. Hadn't heard in a long time, so I went on a good look for it today and finally found it. Hardcore with a lot of electronic influences. I don't really hear a lot of metal, despite the scream vocals and whatnot. I saw them live. They were opening for Baroness. A co-worker of mine back in the day was a fan of Baroness. I was a fan of Genghis Tron. I tagged along. I never used to go to many shows, and I had a good time. They were touring for this album, and I bought this t-shirt, which I have all these years later. But they, as I mentioned, they went away for a dozen years, and they returned in 2022 with Dream Weapon, which is a cool album, but they have returned without Mookie, the old singer, and it's a much less heavy, much more electronic album than even the stuff they did beforehand. Don't have a copy of that yet, but I thought it was pretty cool. But for now, just Board Up the House, and in my opinion, the best Genghis Tron album. So moving on to the bands I meant to talk about. Madball, who are a well-known New York City hardcore band. They formed in the late 80s. It's kind of a spin-off of Agnostic Front. Freddie, the singer, was the younger half-brother of Roger from Agnostic Front, and I think they would just do a lot of shows together, or at least open for Agnostic Front. And they put out a couple EPs, a 7-inch. I remember I was somehow aware of that, and Freddie at the time, I think he was like 12, 13, 14 years old at the time. And when you're a kid, when you hear something like that, it impresses you. So, remember the name Madball. And I remember when the debut album came out. I was probably 12. Set It Off. I think it's more of an anti-gun message than anything on this album. But that album cover definitely probably raised some eyebrows back in the day. I was a big fan of this CD. Remember, if you're from my generation, if you remember Madball as a toy from, had to have been the 80s. And this is their best album. This is really heavy. The vocals are very harsh. Even though it doesn't have like classic metal influences, I do think of it as there being a bunch of metal in here. The title track, Set It Off, It's Time, Down by Law. Those are the best ones on here. The next one, Demonstrating My Style. This is the second full length. Again, I'm going to reference Power 30 again, that half-hour Canadian metal show that they had on Much Music back in the days. And they had like a whole episode dedicated on Madball that just had a bunch of interviews with them and a couple of videos, and probably a couple of videos that they picked. And that's where I saw the video for Pride, Times Are Changing, and I like that song. And my other favorite song on here is probably the opener, Demonstrating My Style. The third album would be called Look My Way, and I didn't get that one at the time. I was getting a little bit out of hardcore, and the album cover, it just looked like it's just way too late 90s. It's just got this like bright yellow background. Almost looks kind of new metal. I stayed away back then. But I did get the 4th album, Hold It Down. And I think this is recognized as one of their better releases. And I definitely had no problem with it when I listened to it. But I can't recall any standout songs. And off the top of my head, I don't have a lot to say about it. after this, Madball would put out, I think, 5 more full-length albums, and they still exist. And so again, although I only have the first, or 3 of the first 4 albums, it's just always one of the bands I'm going to reference if you ask me what one of my favorite hardcore bands are. Okay, Witch Mountain. This is more of a doom metal band, mid-paced doom metal band, female vocals. I got this South of Salem. This was their second album, I think. Came out on Profound Lore. And I forget if it was on tour for this one or the one after, but I did see Witch Mountain live one time, and they were headlining actually. And the 2 opening bands were both female fronted bands. The first one was Castle. I forget where they're from, but I thought they were pretty good actually. I've seen them a couple times and I always enjoyed their set. And then the middle slot was Blood Ceremony, who I would have thought is a bigger name than Witch Mountain, and it was also in their hometown of Toronto. But they were middle of the bill, and I like Blood Ceremony too. But we're talking about Witch Mountain here. Let's go on to the next album, Cauldron of the Wild. Another solid release of mid-paced doom. The singer would leave the band after this, and she would be replaced by another woman. And I have heard those albums. They sound cool, but I don't have them yet. So, Witch Mountain, maybe a somewhat lesser known name in doom. Check them out. Alright. Pelican. This is an instrumental, let's call them post-rock band from Chicago, formed in 2001. First album on Hydra Head, Australasia. As the years go on, this has become my favorite album. 6 long songs. Again, I can't, like a lot of instrumental bands will have, you know, some odd guest appearances or maybe a project they've done with vocals, but I can't recall Pelican ever having any vocals on any of these albums. Any of them at all. I did see Pelican live once, probably around the time of their 3rd album. And they were opening for Tombs. Or sorry, no, they were after Tombs, but opening for ISIS. Second album, The Fire in Our Throats Will Beckon the Thaw. For years, I liked this one better than Australasia. Same kind of thing, though. I call them post-rock. I told you they're instrumental. Not many bands I can compare them to, really. Maybe a heavier, faster Explosions in the Sky. I think that's kind of fair, at least for the old stuff. They picked up the speed on the 3rd album, City of Echoes. It's a faster album, but more melodic. I don't like it as much as the first 2, but it was cool. And Pelican are going to go on to release 3 more full-length albums and a whole bunch of other projects. And I think the next 2 full-lengths weren't great to me. They were nowhere near as good as the first 3. But their most recent album, I think, is definitely a return to form. I'm sorry, I should be able to tell you what that album title is, but the one that came out in 2002, I think it's really good, and I'm gonna get a copy of that for sure. Okay, finally, Cephalic Carnage. They are a grindcore band with a million different influences. If you ask them, they are Rocky Mountain Hydro Grind. So I came on board when they signed to Relapse, and this was their second full-length album, Exploiting Dysfunction. I was a big fan of this one. I was taken aback. It was definitely one of the first really weird albums I got. This is back in. It says 2000. I would have guessed 99. But yeah, a little bit like again, grindcore, but almost like a Mr. Bungle kind of jump into different styles. And there is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, but there's no real humor. It's a serious band. And the one after this, Lucid Interval, that was always a standout to me. They released a couple more albums after that, including this one, Xenosapien. I think this might be their weakest release, but I do own it here. Nothing to complain about. I just didn't find it as interesting as the prior albums. And yeah, they put out material after this, but they're still a functioning band, but they have not put out an album since 2010. So Cephalic Carnage, cool grindcore band. They put out a new album. I'm all ears. And yeah, fun mix of bands. Thanks for watching. Bye.